Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump reacted to the Orlando shooting over the weekend with tweets and statements. This morning, the two presumptive nominees blitzed network and cable television, calling into nearly every major morning show to discuss their policies and policy prescriptions for combating terrorism, which they laid out in speeches this afternoon. Clinton spoke in Cleveland, Ohio. Trump spoke in Manchester, New Hampshire. They each spoke about terrorism, gun rights, and the LGBT community. Here's what it sounded like.
The Orlando terrorist may be dead, but the virus that poisoned his mind remains very much alive.
It's an assault on the ability of free people to live their lives, love who they want, and express their identity.
The attack in Orlando makes it even more clear. We cannot contain this threat. We must defeat it.
When I'm elected, I will suspend immigration from areas of the world where there is a proven history of terrorism against the United States, Europe, or our allies.
Inflammatory, anti-Muslim rhetoric and threatening to ban the families and friends of Muslim Americans, as well as millions of Muslim business people and tourists from entering our country, hurts the vast majority of Muslims who love freedom and hate terror.
Hillary Clinton, for months, and despite so many attacks, repeatedly refused to even say the words radical Islam until I challenged her yesterday. And guess what? She will probably say them. She sort of has said them, but let's see what happens.
We have to stem the flow of jihadists from Europe and America to Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and then back again.
We need to tell the truth about radical Islam, and we need to do it now.
If the FBI is watching you for suspected terrorist links, you shouldn't be able to just go buy a gun with no questions asked.
Her plan is to disarm law-abiding Americans, abolishing the Second Amendment, and leaving only the bad guys and terrorists with guns. No good. Not going to happen, folks. Not going to happen.
To all the LGBT people grieving today in Florida and across our country, you have millions of allies who will always have your back. And I am one of them.
Ask yourself, who is really the friend of women and the LB and LGBT community? Donald Trump with actions or Hillary Clinton with her words? I will tell you who the better friend is, and someday I believe that will be proven out big league.
So, Mark, big speeches and other media appearances by the two presumptive nominees today. How do you think, on the basis of what we've seen, how do you think the tragedy in Orlando will impact the race between Clinton and Trump?
Well, we both said that if there's an event like this, it's going to elevate national security, maybe even on par with the economy, as a test for these two candidates. I thought Hillary Clinton today and her team executed in the text of the speech, in her performance, being both tough and optimistic, and in terms of the semiotics of the event itself. I thought they executed once again, as they have for the last week or so, pretty close to flawlessly. She's in a different zone now in terms of communication, and she's showing a lot of confidence. I thought Donald Trump gave people what he has on offer to be a different kind of commander-in-chief, to shake things up. And when he today talked about banning immigration from countries that have been problematic as opposed to a Muslim ban, I think you see him simultaneously grappling with how to seem tough, but also perhaps trying to change some of the policies that have bothered people even within his own party.
I want to just focus on Trump to start with, just because in terms of the major policy thing, Hillary Clinton basically articulated what has previously been her policy with a few little bells and whistles on the side. Trump went further with his Muslim ban. I mean, I know you're saying that he's trying to move it away from being a religious test to broaden it and say that it should be more focused on terrorist ties. However, in some sense, he's basically adding to the Muslim ban. He didn't actually take the Muslim ban off the table. So he's gone further now with this, and I think it's going to give, for a lot of Democrats, it's going to be a bigger target. For a lot of Republicans who are worried about him as commander-in-chief, I don't think he did a lot, even with the teleprompter up there, to ease their concerns, partly because he said a bunch of things that were not true, including suggesting that the shooter was an Afghani as opposed to being born in the United States, suggesting that kind of casting a very broad net over the entire Muslim American community, basically saying they all know when there are bad people in their midst and they just are failing to turn those people in. So my sense, I thought, that Trump, you're right, he gave people exactly what he's been giving them, and he's going to be consistent, I think, in that sense, the bigger, tougher approach. But I don't think that he's did a lot today in that speech, and we could talk more about the things he said on morning television, which is in some ways worse. But in that speech today, I don't think he's going to have a lot of Republicans who watched that, who are worried about him as commander-in-chief, who thought that that was a speech that would make them feel reassured.
Secretary Clinton and her team are confident in their bones that in the end, eliminating Trump as an acceptable alternative on the economy, on his business dealings, etc., will be possible, but that it will be absolutely possible and perhaps most decisive in doing it on national security. And they'll look at the performance today and they'll say she performed as a steady leader and he performed as a much more of a hothead. There are a lot of Americans, though, who will look at her record and at the record of the last 8 years and say, well, he may be a hothead, but that's what we need. They may be underestimating the extent to which Trump's performance today has broad appeal. But as I said a couple times, they're so confident that her performance today is a winning performance on these issues against him.
Well, let's be clear. The biggest weakness that she has, and it continues to be a genuine weakness, I think, in terms of her stature, her resume, her ability, as you said, now to step up her game and communicate in a way that makes her seem like a credible commander-in-chief. She's playing at a very high level now, and I think she still has room to grow. Her biggest weakness, as I started to say, is still the record, and I think Trump will be able to make some headway by twinning her, by yoking the Obama record with her, and say, look, the country's not safer. It may be safer than it was on 9/11 itself, but things are getting worse. There's a bad trend line here. The Obama administration policies, both abroad and at home, in dealing with this threat have not helped to make it safer. She's going to have to deal with that, with the history that she has as being part of the Obama administration foreign policy and national security team. She's still going to have to deal with that, and I think you're right that Trump can make some headway with her on that front. But as I say, there are an awful lot about what he's saying that's still going to make a lot of Republicans nervous and a lot of Democrats giddy.